Hey everyone, Arlington Matrix here. Today we're taking a look at Opentoonz, a software that I was a little weary of at first, but now that I've tried it out, I found it to be well ahead of Synfig Studio, and it takes my #1 spot of software that I'd recommend to people who want to learn how to animate. In this video, we're going to take a look at some very basic stuff, from getting started to making a very simple line animation. This is basically how to get started. I don't want to get into much detail, and there is a bit of a learning curve, but I encourage you to try some of the different tools and just see what you get. When you open it up, you're greeted with the new project screen. You can create a new project or just use the default sandbox project. That's what I'll be using. I've already played around with this a little bit, so as you can see I have some scenes on the right over here. I'm going to be using my test scene 2. That should be just fine. Once you create a scene, you're greeted with a white canvas and a confusing interface. Up at the top right here, just make sure that you're in the Basic tab. That's where we're going to be getting started here. Along the left, we see the toolbar bearing a collection of tools: Animate, Select, Brush, Geometric, Type, Fill, etc. We'll pick the brush and just draw a random shape on the screen. I'm using a drawing tablet, so it's already taking the pressure input. And as we can see on the right here, it's created a new layer in one of these columns here. This is a raster layer. So if we zoom right in, we see that these are individual pixels and not vectors. If we look down in the bottom here, we have our color palette. This color palette shows us what colors exist on the current layer. We have white and black right now. If we go through these palettes, there's a variety of defaults you can select from. If we modify our color 2, and then apply it, then we can see that this changes the color of the line. If we had thousands of different frames, then changing this color 1 changes color 1 for all of those frames. This is extremely useful, especially if you've made thousands of frames and you just want to change the colors a little bit. So again, we'll go over to the right here. We're going to click the next frame in our animation, which just got rid of the drawing that we had. We can select the onion skin on this green-red circle in this column here. This will show us some of the previous frames. And I'm just going to draw a quick animation by hand here. Really, this is all it takes. This makes a hand-drawn animation very quick, very simple. Now what I wanted to show here, if we take a look at the columns here and decide we want to change this, we'll call it line color. It's selected, we change it to white. Well, now it's blending in with the background. We don't really see much with that. Let's change it to black and then apply. And that modifies the color for every frame in our animation. Furthermore, if we want, we can add a color here. I suppose we'll just copy and paste this in. If we close off this area and then use the fill tool, it fills it in. And that's great and everything, but let's say we want to change that color. We don't like the color red. Change it to blue here and apply it to the image, and it's applied it to that image. Of course, this doesn't exist in the rest of those frames that we've drawn by hand. So there's a very basic animation using Opentoonz. Of course, it's hand-drawn, but based on my clock, that took less than 10 minutes to get just a very basic animation down. But what if you want to do a vector drawing instead? Indeed, if we compare this program to Synfig Studio, we'll have to look at vector animations as well. So let's create a vector layer up here with this icon on the top right. Select a vector layer. Now if we draw a random shape, that looks all well and good. We can use the Modify Curve tool on the left here. If we click on this, we can see all the control points. We can modify them if we want to, and just like before, we have our color palette. Now one interesting thing I forgot to mention here, you can take this color palette. We also have these textures that we can apply. So we can not only apply a color to this line, we can apply a texture to it, and we'll make it look like bricks. So there's some other tabs in here, but unfortunately they crashed my program. But you can apply different textures and stuff instead of just drawing a simple line. You can use this little key button here. This creates a keyframe, and the Animate tool in the top left, we can move this around within the keyframe. And we have two keyframes. We have 2 frames defined as keyframes. Then those frames we can set the position, rotation, scale. And the program will just interpolate for us. Now there's a few different ways that you can have it do this. This Animate tool doesn't just have to be for a vector layer. We can load a picture in here if we want. So let's just copy and paste a picture into here. And when we load the image in, it is on its own layer. We can click that, modify it if we want. Since this image isn't coming from Opentoonz, Opentoonz doesn't know what kind of color palette it should have. It just leaves it as is. So the colors here are fixed with what they are. But if we want to, we can modify this little image. Here, let's just draw a mustache on it. So we can drag down the column here to create content in these otherwise empty frames, and then the Animate tool, we can modify a start position, and then select the last frame, modify the end position. And if we play it, Opentoonz has done the in-betweens, and we have a very simple animation. Now, by default, these are all just a linear transformation. There is a way to change it to ease in, ease out. You can make that default in your settings, or right-click the white line under the key to try and modify it around. We'll be covering the specifics of that in the next video. If we zoom in here, we can see that we've got the mustache. Now let's delete everything in that scene and we'll start from scratch. I'm going to show you here how to do shape tweening with vectors. So we'll start with a vector layer, draw a random vector, and then we'll add another frame. And in this new frame, we'll draw a different shape. We can see that this is creating a new frame in the level editor here. If we click on frame 2 and hit the insert key on the keyboard, that adds a frame. We're going to add a bunch of these. We'll just make 24 of them. Now we can shift, you can select the top one and then shift select the bottom. That selects all of these frames, and you see these little in-between texts on the right of the frames. We click on that, then not only can we draw the in-between frames, we can define it as a linear transformation, ease in, whatever we want. So in our editor, we'll clear everything but the first frame, and then we'll just drag the last 22 frames in. We now have a bunch of frames defining a shape transformation. So if we look at this, it's going the wrong way. So if we look at this, it's going the wrong way. And that's because we drew our original shape clockwise, and our new shape we drew counterclockwise. So we have to flip it. The easy way to do this is just to draw a new shape. Just delete the last frame, add a new one, and get it as close as we can. Then we can reselect the frames and in between, and now it's going the way we expected. It looks a lot better now. Now, we didn't have to create a new frame for this at all. We could have just duplicated the first frame and modified its content. You can also play around with the different tools on the left here. If you're familiar with vector graphics software, there aren't too many surprises until you get down to bone and plastic deformed stuff, which we'll talk about in the next video. This has been a very basic introduction to Opentoonz. I'm Arlington Matrix. Have a great day.